People have been sending notices to me over email about Christian nationalism. This tells me a couple of things. First, people are worried about this. Second, I should be worried about this. It's something at least that I should be thinking and speaking more about. This may seem obvious because I'm not only a pastor, I should say, but a Baptist pastor. And Baptist pastors, as I say often from this perch, are particularly interested in the relationship between church and state here in America. And so here we go. The first thing to clarify about so-called Christian nationalism is that it is not a Christian movement. It is a political ideology. What ideology? That America was founded as and remains a Christian nation. It was not. It does not. The vision of the founders was quite distinctive. It was that America should be grounded in religious liberty, which meant both no establishment of religion and the free exercise of any religion or no religion at all. Seems really important just to clarify that. So important was it to the founders' vision that they wrote it into the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So important was it to colonial-era Baptists that they bit the ears of the founders from Thomas Jefferson to James Madison to ensure this came to pass, this amendment, these words, this approach to the separation of church and state. These are facts of U.S. history and Baptist history, and don't let anybody tell you different. Second thing to say about Christian nationalism is that it is an ideology of exclusion, not inclusion. While Christian nationalism may at first appear to be a cohesive, even kind of uniting vision of religion in America, kind of bringing together the church and the state into partnership and alliance, it is in fact not that. It intends not only to elevate its brand of pseudo-Christian belief rooted in bigotry, but also to denigrate and eliminate all other religious faiths and practices. Mary named some of them: Muslim faith, Hindu faith, Sikh faith, Buddhist faith, but also Jewish faith ultimately, and yes, progressive Christian belief and practice. And this gets really very concrete. Left to itself, Christian nationalist ideology would strip away equal rights from the LGBTQ community, non-Christians, women, people of color, immigrants. This ideology is based then not on unity, but on division. Its operating principle is that other expressions of faith, other world religions or practices, have no home in America, and that the state's job is to repress these in favor of its version of the Christian nation. Now, this is profoundly different from both our founders' vision and our Christian vision of embrace of other faiths, practices, and people. And so whenever and wherever Christian nationalism takes hold, Christian faith, as we understand it and practice it, is at risk, as are the gospel values we celebrate in the way of Jesus, the values and the virtues of love, of equality, of peace, of social justice, and the common good. But here is the larger point, that while Christian nationalism would divide us, our calling, our mission is a practice of gospel faith that will serve to unite us. That this is the vision Jesus calls us to. Which brings me to the heart of the sermon this morning, which is in fact reconciliation. Reconciliation. The state of being reconciliated from the Latin conciliar, meaning to bring together or make friendly, thus to bring together as friends again, reconciliate. Reconciliation implies then that we were friends before, somewhere, somehow. And this may seem a grand assumption. Indeed, it may just not be true. But at least let me argue that in this narrow sense, it is true that we are, all of us, children of God, and thus all commonly held in one grace, unrecognized as that grace may be. And so to get back to this sense and to resolve to live out from it seems to me to be an apt way of thinking about God's grand project of reconciliation. Now, our grounding text on this theme is, and Bobby, thank you for that spectacular reading, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, those verses, specifically Paul's concern over the basis of unity in the Corinthian church, surrounding names. More specifically still, the question of in what name our life together is based. What name holds us together as Christians, at least? So sure, a little narrower focus here than, like American life in general. But you got to start somewhere, right? Now, in ancient Corinth, Paul has founded this church, writes to this church. Paul's audience, as in Greek culture generally, in that setting, society was based on something called the pater familias, the responsibility of the father or father figure to mentor the household, to teach and instruct and hold the family together. Paul seems to have initially served that function for the church at Corinth. I'm assuming he did that for all his churches. He founded them, he taught them, he was with them, mentored them. And so his paternalistic tone at times, was very strong. But, of course, Paul was only one person. And he'd been absent from Corinth. I mean, he's got other churches. Can't be everywhere at once. Plus, he's in jail at least half the time. There's that. But he's been absent from Corinth. And so the question, what or who is the basis of unity now? If not Paul, then who? And he gives us some ideas. Apollos, Cephas, Sosthenes? Or is it someone or something else? This question of the basis of unity is for Paul not just a matter of status, but really a very survival of the church. How, given all our differences, all our divisions, do we expect to establish, much less renew, our unity if we can't even agree upon what unity is based? Hasn't this always been the rub? Isn't this the rub still? That the reason we can't achieve unity in the church, just for instance, isn't that we don't disagree about things, some things. Of course, we don't agree about everything. It is that we can't even agree on the basis of unity in the midst of our disagreements. And unless and until we can do that, we can agree on this. All talk of unity, not to mention reconciliation, it's kind of useless. Now, I have a context for raising this today. It's in addition to just that torque of 1 Corinthians chapter 1 itself. Paul's letter, of course, has its own historical context, which we'll speak to again just in a bit. But the one I have in mind now comes right from your news feed and mine. It is a reflection on the meaning of Charlie Kirk's funeral / political rally last Sunday. And that event was both. It was, yes, for several hours, indistinguishable from an evangelical megachurch gathering. The praise music, the emotional, faith-filled testimonies of grief and love, a lot of it quite genuine. But at about the midway point, its tone and its tenor began to change. It turned sharply, politically partisan in both speaker and content, all the way to the climactic ending. It became, in other words, not a memorial for Charlie Kirk, but a rally for Christian nationalism, folks. So what is a Christian to take away from such an event? What was the name, the core profession, the key confession, the central expression of faith and belief in this memorial / rally for Charlie Kirk? And did that name aim to unite or divide? I ask as a pastor, concerned with such things. I ask in sincerity as one preoccupied with such questions over my lengthy career my lengthy time right here. I ask as one deeply afraid for the church and for her witness in the world from this day and going forward. And I ask because what I heard in that rally was more than one core profession. What I heard was more than one key confession. And what I heard was more than one central expression of the reason for gathering and mourning for such a soul as Charlie Kirk. Now, that event last Sunday out in Phoenix was unfolding, of course, on the day that you and I, many of us at least, were gathered here to represent our own telling of the gospel in which we stand at our Everybody Show Up Sunday. And a fine day it was, too. Fine day. I suggested to you that hour that not every Sunday worship service needs to wrestle head on, as we often do, with such serious and fundamental questions as prophetic justice, as world peace, as care for the most vulnerable, and we didn't. We didn't get into all that last week. But as I said that to you, as I claimed that, there were other claims spilling from an arena packed to overflow out on the airwaves, a set of claims about the ultimate meaning of goodness and righteousness as they exist and ought to rule in this land. There was, to be clear, a lot of names, a lot of naming going on there, as we indulged here last Sunday in a gentler, more gracious recital of God's uncompromising love for each and for all of us. And all or most of us heard where all the naming culminated. It came down to two speakers, Erica Kirk, wife of the deceased, and the president of the most powerful nation on earth. Imagine what you wish about the headspace and heart space of a grieving widow. Read what you will into the larger narrative and mission of the organization her husband founded and she inherits. It is difficult to ignore, and we should not, the tremendous heart and courage required to utter the words she uttered, so core to the faith you and I do embrace. Those words of forgiveness towards her husband's killer. Do not discount those words. By the time Erica Kirk uttered those words, that speaker's podium, its plotters and handlers, and largely the crowd had so moved on to Christian nationalism that her words stuck out like a lone wildflower from cracked concrete. But they were heard, they were felt, they were absorbed, and while they were interpreted as much by the terms of Christian nationalists, accusation, superiority, and judgment, as by traditional gospel humility and grace, still they reverberated. They opened a way to conciliar, to reconciliation, a coming together of hearts beyond all judgment, all acrimony, all blood vengeance. And I honor them. Erica Kirk said what others did not, said that what anyone might rightly hope and expect from a gathering claiming the name of Christian, celebrating one hailed as a model Christian. Erica Kirk uttered that the answer to hate is not hate, that the answer from the gospel is love and always love, even for our real or imagined enemies. And it was electric, and it rang thick with emotion and conviction, and that is when the last speaker took the podium. The president, icon of Christian nationalism, who rapidly reestablished not the bringing together again of reconciliation, but rather the permission for the audience to hate. This final speaker delivered what he often has and does, the gospel of Christian nationalism, stated it as clearly and irrefutably as possible to do. Referring to Erica Kirk, you just heard that it was said by her, love your enemies. But I say to you, hate your enemies and wish them harm. When it comes to the ideology of Christian nationalism, it is difficult to get more unequivocal than that. Now, Charlie Kirk's own rhetoric sounded a lot more like the president's rhetoric from that podium than like his wife Erica's, although, to be fair, there's a lot of cherry picking going on about what he said and what he didn't say. We hear the worst of it if we're looking for it. He was not a monolith. He was a human being. He had a range of thoughts and convictions. I made a fresh list of his often uttered statements. I'll spare you those this morning, but the ones that I've seen sound nothing on the surface like her words. Here is the thing about people. Here's the thing about Paul's church in Corinth, Paul's quarreling with from a distance, probably from jail. Here's the thing about us. We are easily swayed by impassioned pleas to one way of being in the world or another. And people, many very fine people, are being slowly swayed as we speak. Even a short speech, even a moment in time, can shift the ground of truth for many. This is why our words and our witness and our work matter so much. This is why they are so critical. Minds are being made up. Hearts are settling in. Views of the gospel, true or not, are being adopted as we speak. So, just how are we reconciled? Here's reconciliation: finding our common humanity in the midst of our common estrangement. Here's reconciliation: laughing when others laugh, weeping when others weep. Here's reconciliation: coming back together, because apart, we will never be whole. Never be whole. Here is reconciliation: the bold commitment to be bridge people in a world of wall builders. The way we frame things, the way we name things, matters dearly, especially as you and I endeavor to stand in the breach of a widening gap in our culture, a profound misunderstanding, a gaping wound in grace, which the open-hearted, broad-spirited way of Jesus, gospel of Jesus, can and must now fill. Amen.